Good evening and welcome to yet another version of of Territories Talk. My name is Chris Famous, as you know, and tonight I'm pleased to have not one but two ministers, honorable ministers, one in Bermuda and one in Turks and Caicos, which is also known as Junior Bermuda. So it's my pleasure to introduce Honorable Jamell Robinson, MP from Turks and Caicos, and Jason P. Hayward, Minister from Bermuda. Introduce yourself, Honorable Robinson.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for having me, and good evening, Turks and Caicos, Bermuda, Mother Bermuda, I guess, in this instance, eh?
You're learning.
The wider Caribbean, all my colleagues. I'm Jamell Robinson, Minister of Physical Planning and Infrastructure Development. I am a first-term Member of Parliament, All Island, or at-large candidate, MP. This is my first term, first time being a minister. I was previously the Minister of Health during the peak of COVID, so got my stripes real early in my tenure. As well, father of three, husband, and I guess basically a nationalist of the Turks and Caicos Islands, to summarize who I am.
All right. And introduce yourself, Honorable Hayward.
Good evening, Brother Famous and your listening audience. My name is Jason Hayward. I'm the Minister responsible for Economy and Labor in Bermuda, responsible for economic growth, development, the expansion of jobs, labor standards, labor rights, labor relations, workforce development, financial assistance. Like my brother, this is my first term as a minister. I was elected to Parliament in 2019, and I became a minister in the year 2020, and I've been plowing away ever since.
Okay, so we'll start off with you, Honorable Robinson. First of all, how you all making out with the passage of Tropical Storm Franklin?
So far, so good. Of course, we're still on the tropical storm warning with Tropical Storm Franklin. The last update, it was trending towards the east of Grand Turk. So long as it stays on that track, which is north-northeast, it'll kind of pass us to our eastern side of the island chain. So it's kind of moving away from us, and the majority of the winds are on the eastern side of the storm itself. So what we are experiencing, and from my latest report from persons who are on Grand Turk, the wind speeds have picked up a little bit, but there's been some raining off and on throughout the country today. So I think we just have to make sure we don't have any quick flash flooding and any just flooding or generally. But um, the last updates from the Bahamas Met Office as well as our TCI weather service that we were looking at 1 to 3 inches of rain in the eastern islands, which is Grand Turks, South Caicos, and Salt Key. So all in all, as long as the storm continues on the forward speed it's on, which is I believe it was like 13 miles an hour, we should be okay by sometime early tomorrow morning. It should be well on its way out of the territory. So we're doing fine so far. Fingers crossed that it continues on the pathway it's on right now.
Mhm. Okay. So what is the total population of, for those who don't know, what's the total population of Turks and Caicos Island?
Well, right now, unofficially, about 45 to 50,000. We're literally in the middle of conducting our census, so we'll have harder numbers. We
Mhm.
anticipate it might go up to 55, even 60,000 on completion, but that's where the last estimates were. So we're doing the census, and hopefully we'll have those hard numbers by the end of this year, early next year, the latest, and then we'll have an idea of what the actual more recent numbers are. Because the last time we did the census in 2012, we were at 32,000 persons, but we've had significant growth over the last decade or more. So we're looking to see what those numbers are
Mhm.
very shortly.
Okay. And approximately what's your land mass? How many square miles do you have in Turks and Caicos?
We are 193 square miles, and you can't be asking me these questions, famous, since you're calling us baby Bermuda. You're supposed to know this. You're supposed to
No,
say, and Turks and Caicos is
no,
193 square miles, you know.
it's not a matter of what I know, it's what I want you, it's what I
I
want
know, I
you
know.
to
I'm
educate
teasing
the
you.
people about. Because
I'm
somewhere
teasing
along
you.
the line, Bermuda's coming back for our property, right? So,
I'm sure you still have property in Grand
yeah,
Turk
yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe Squawky.
Yeah,
Pretty
if
sure.
for Bermudians that are listening, they would hear your accent and realize and say this guy sounds almost Bermudian. You know what I mean? Because especially in the islands like Soul Key,
Grand
Grand
Turk.
Turk,
Yeah.
you guys, the accents are strong Bermudian accents. There's no
Yeah.
mistaking your accent. You know what I mean?
And my mother's from Grand Turk as well, and that's where I grew up as a kid. So it'll sound like I'm very Bermudan today. And I could remember during Hurricane Ike, funny enough, the Bermuda Regiment came down for about 2 weeks, and then once they touched down, because I hadn't really up to that time seen or spoken with anyone from Bermuda itself, when the guys came down of all color, all complexions, and they sounded like Grand Turk people. I was like, what is this? And this is in the middle of a storm, but little culture shock in the middle. And that was about 15 years ago, 2008 Hurricane Ike, they came down to assist us. And now we actually have our own regiment stood up about a year or two ago now. So we learned something and we saw something and got it done similarly as you would have many, many years ago, I'm sure.
Yes. So in that 100 and something odd square miles, you obviously got a lot of infrastructure to maintain and build. So what are some of the key projects that you all are working on?
So the biggest project we're working on now is the Providenciales International Airport, recently named the Howard Hamilton International Airport,
Mhm.
um, which is projecting to be anywhere from $350 million to $400 million price tag. And we're looking to go the PPP route to be able to do the financing for that piece of infrastructure. So all things being equal, hopefully we'll be able to ground break on that project within the next 12 months because we're at the stage where we're doing pre-qualifications for all the interested bidders. So we've been working on that for essentially since we got in office, which is 2.5 years ago. But of course, doing all the studies and doing the justifications for that type of expenditure is very important because we wanted to take our time to make sure we did it right because we've been in joint venture arrangements. We've managed it ourselves on our TCI Airports Authority. previously or as currently. So we're trying to get the right things done. Then another major project that has already started is the redevelopment of the port in the South Dock Providenciales, which is the main hub for importation of all the goods basically throughout the country. And that's a $60 million infrastructure project that's already started. We already
All
started
right.
phase one.
Let's pause for a minute.
No problem.
This airport, a few years ago, we had some visitors from Turks and Caicos came up and says they're looking at our airport, our new air terminal, I should say.
Right.
And they asked us, so what do you think of the the contractor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing out of our mouth was run, like fast, right?
Right.
So I'm saying that I don't know who's bidding. That's not my business, obviously, right? But what I would say is you all actually did better than us, because the previous government, pre 2017, they had no bids. They just gave the contract, literally wrapped up a contract, right, in silver paper, and gave to this firm, right?
Right.
And since this, Bermuda has been suffering. I mean, like in all ways, we've been suffering because of this. So I think you all have made a good choice in putting out, I guess, a RFP or whatever to
Right.
see who's going to say what, right?
Right. All right.
But whatever you do, don't do it for those people. I ain't calling no names, but don't do
I
it.
know you got. We're fully aware, and the thing about it, my predecessor, she was on that mission to Bermuda to check things out as well, and we're well aware of those contractors. I'll just say that, leave it at, because I don't want to prejudice any potential bidding processes, but we have, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so tell us more about the port now.
Yeah, so the port is about a $60 million development. Have increased berthing so we could take bigger ships from the U.S., which is our main port, paving the whole area, extending so we could have dual ships coming in, because right now we only could do one at a time. We're going to improve the stevedoring operation as well for the location. We're going to expand the port area in of itself, because the footprint where it is now isn't enough to be able to accommodate the type of projections we're going to be looking at into the future, because we have a significant amount of development that we're poised to have in terms of increasing rooms from hotels and or villas throughout the country, but particularly in Providenciales. And as the Minister of Planning, which is physical planning, I would get to sign off on most of those minister certificates, which would be anything over $1 million that has to go to the planning board. So those things are coming in time, basically, with the airport being redeveloped, as well as the port being redeveloped to support the type of infrastructure development that we would be doing. And of course, we have to invest significantly in the road network. We have slated thus far, and I say thus far, about $20 million in roads that we are looking to do over the next 18 months throughout the Turks and Caicos Islands. And of course, we would want to do a lot more as well. So, and my focus particularly is trying to get improvements in our community infrastructure, those community roads, because yes, we would have a few highways that takes the major traffic from the airport to the hotel districts and stuff like that. But for me, if the resident who has to go to these hotels and go to the office blocks to work can't have a nicely manicured road into and out of their neighborhoods, then we haven't done our jobs as elected ministers. And of course, building schools, building clinics, and all of those types of infrastructures to increase and improve the livelihoods of our citizenry is what me and this government is focused on in our tenure. So we intend to deliver that for the people well in advance of our going back to the polls in another 18 months or so.
So let me ask you this. You have like in Bermuda we call it Ministry of Works and Engineering.
Yeah.
Who as far as the roads, who's going to be responsible for building the roads and then maintaining the roads? Because that's actually an issue in Bermuda that we're a challenge that we're having right now.
Well, that's essentially my ministry, but the way we are doing it now is we would have it contracted to a private contractor to do the building. So the roads that I'm talking about, at least just under 5 million in invitation to tenders already out. So we're getting bids to bring that in. Now, the smaller side of the maintenance would fall with the Public Works Department, which is in my ministry now. So that would be fixing any potholes and small works. But the majority of the work and the maintenance would be something that's contracted out. Now, in the past, like in the last 10 to 15 years, a decision was made to convert the Public Works Department more into a engineering and maintenance services department, which you kind of more or less project manage everything. So a lot of the improvements or the skills that used to be in government are hired directly to be able to do some of these things and have the heavy machinery and all these things to do it ourselves. It was divested from the government. Now, I guess one might argue which route is the best to take in terms of maintaining your public infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know because both have their ups and downs, so their challenges as well as their benefits. But that's the route we do now. So it's primarily contracted to private sector companies to be able to do it on our behalf, and we just give oversight to make sure it's done properly.
Okay, I want to take a moment to pause to introduce to you, Honorable Robinson, Honorable Hayward, my co-host, lovely Shaina M. Smith Archer from the Virgin Islands. I don't say the B name because that's a bad word right now.
Yes, the Virgin Islands. I had a very intense conversation about our name today, actually. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening to our guests and to our audience near and far. Thank you for tuning in tonight.
Yes. So continue, Honorable.
So yeah, in a nutshell, that's where we are with our management of how we do the infrastructure with the road. So it's privately contracted. That's the route we've taken over the last 15 plus years after the reform.
And what are some of the other infrastructure developments?
Okay, so some of the other infrastructure developments, and again, this is kind of my not pet projects, but my interest, and again, trying to focus on community enhancement. So we've done a series of gazebos for recreation. We're looking at refurbishing a number of parks and courts across the Turks and Caicos Islands, improvement of pavements, of course, doing general street cleaning and maintenance, as well as doing various community enhancement projects, fixing jetties, improving our beach facilities across the country. So we have several projects that we are going out to tender in relatively short order in this budget cycle to be able to do improvements. And particularly for Grand Turk ongoing, we have our Grand Turk Sports Complex that will be a great facility and can be doubled as a shelter, clearly, given we're in the hurricane zone. Never too much shelter space, as well as a number of other projects going on across the country for us. So I think we're definitely busy. The Ministry of PPID is definitely fully engaged in these projects, working across the government, because as I say, and as has been said about our ministry, we consider ourselves the engine that drives government, because as your Ministry of Infrastructure goes, so does the government.
So let me ask you this: how many under your ministry, specifically to do infrastructure, how many staff do you all have?
Not enough, I can tell you that.
Every minister says the same thing. So I hear
no, not enough. Legitimately, not enough. We were actually having a conversation today, me and the premier and our ministerial colleagues, because we were doing a pre-cabinet as we have cabinet tomorrow, and he was pointing out to me, looking at some of the vacancies throughout my ministry, and we have 19 vacancies. And those are key positions to be able to deliver better for the people of the country. And that's just the vacancies that's in the budget. That isn't the need necessarily for my ministry to be able to deliver. While we are small, because for us it's only 4 departments. So we have public works, estates management, we have the planning department, as well as our housing department. And I forgot to mention that is a part of our infrastructure improvements, because we just recently rolled out our housing policy that we have $3 million set aside to start the housing initiatives throughout the country as well. So we're relatively small. So when I say 19, that's 19 across just 4 departments, but it's key in terms of us supporting not just the initiatives that fall directly under my ministry, but also the initiatives that is across every ministry. So some of the things I would outline in terms of the parks and the beach improvements, those might be under the sports department substantively, or education, and the others might be under environment or tourism, on the other hand. But we have to give input, and from the QS standpoint, engineers, project management, to be able to see those things to fruition. So legitimately, this one minister legitimately needs more staff, even though we all say that. And
Okay.
I'm sure Jason is going to say he needs more staff as well in a minute when he comes home. But legitimately, I need more staff.
All right. So I'll take a moment to pause to speak about thank you for that. Our media partners throughout the region. We have Cayman, Marl, and Cayman Islands, CBN Caribbean Broadcast Network in both the U.S. and um, other Virgin Islands, Channel 82 in Bermuda, Radio Saba PJFE, Barbados CB Caribbean Broadcast Network, Channel 8, and we also have Montserrat ZJB Radio. And in the Turks and Caicos Island, we have Radio Turks and Caicos. So what we're going to do now, Minister, we're going to just go through a few of your slides, and you just give us a brief description, and then we'll transition to Honorable Hayward.
All right. So what you're looking at there is the repairs to a bridge, and this is temporary repairs to this bridge for the soil ponds that were left behind by some people some many years ago for the salt industry. I'm not going to call any names.
Yeah, you left your gold mine, you saying?
Yes, the gold mine. Right. But yeah, that's a pond. That's the passing. It was kind of falling apart. So we sent it out to tender, intermediate tendering, for them to kind of pull the cover back in to make it possible again. So that's what those guys are working on. And in fact, we are actually looking to invest about somewhere in the neighborhood of about four to $4.5 million in actually enhancing ponds and bridges on Grand Turks specifically. And in one of those areas, we are looking to basically dig out the pond, kind of put a promenade back in, so backfill it. So we have like a shopping district in that particular area, and then like ring fence it with road infrastructure around it to kind of revitalize that entire area. So that's one of the big projects, because of course ponds are a part of our history and our heritage. So that's something that we want to enhance, not only for visitors, but for the local population who can enjoy it and, continue to go fishing in the ponds and just have it as a different aspect and enhance it from what was left behind, of course.
Okay, and this slide.
So what you're looking at is the day that the entire cabinet visited Middle Caicos. So we went in early to North Caicos because we held cabinet in North Caicos the following day. So this is us at the bridge between North or the causeway between North and Middle Caicos, heading over. So you would see myself in the blue shirt to the right, Honorable Conley, our Deputy Premier, E.J. Saunders, Honorable Otis Morris, the District Commissioners for North and Middle. Our Premier is in it looks like
Shades.
Shades in the
Yeah.
light tannish jacket, right? Next to him would have been the acting governor, deputy governor, Anya Williams, and our attorney general, and the other members of the cabinet as well. So that's what that was.
Okay. And this one?
So there, I'm discussing with the people in South Caicos the revitalization of the Regatta Village. So I was giving them a presentation of what is to come, because that's one of the infrastructure projects that we're doing between this budget cycle and the next budget cycle, which is about $1 million. And the Regatta Village is a festival village, and that it's been going. The Regatta Village and the Regatta Festival would have celebrated its 56th year this past May, and it commemorates the time that the Queen would have visited South Caicos, and they held a regatta festival. So every year for the last 56 years, I believe, she's been to South Caicos, or the Turks and Caicos in general, and of course, she's passed since that time, of course. So that's what I'm describing to the people of South Caicos.
All right. Well, thank you, Honorable. We'll circle back to you later on with some other pertinent questions about TCI.
No problem.
And we now transition to your fellow minister, Honorable Jason P. Hayward. Good evening, Minister. How you doing?
Good evening, Brother Famous. And again, good evening to your listening audience. I'm doing well this evening.
So tell us, who is Jason P. Hayward?
Jason P. Hayward. I'm the minister responsible for economy and labor. I'm responsible for economic growth, development, expansion of jobs. The departments underneath my particular remit include the Department of Immigration, Department of Financial Assistance, Department of Labor, Department of Workforce Development, Department of Economic Development, also responsible for CRINGAs such as the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation and the Bermuda Business Development Agency.
Okay, so sound like you have a lot of departments, obviously, but tonight specifically, we want to touch on the work that you've done for the minimum hourly wage, which is a first for Bermuda. And why it's important for the region is because in islands, our sister overseas territories of Cayman Islands and the Virgin Islands, they too are in the middle of trying to get towards a minimum hourly wage, or in some cases a revised minimum hourly wage. So lead us into how did we come about with what, not so much the actual figure per se, but the mechanics towards collaborating with employers and unions and so on to get to where we are.
Okay, so I'm going to start from the 1960s when the Progressive Labor Party was formed. And it had as part of one of its early election manifestos that there should be some sort of minimum wage established in Bermuda to reduce the level of exploitation and ensure that persons receive a dignified wage for a fair day's work. The framework that we utilized was to first put a mechanism in place to establish living wage. And so we went with the model of a wage commission. And so we established a wage commission to do two things: look into a minimum wage and look into a living wage and provide the minister with strategic recommendations. The wage commission is to issue reports to the minister. And then the next step after the wage commission provides the minister a report, then the minister needs to put a framework in place for the establishment of a minimum wage. That is actually done through an order. There are adjacent pieces of legislation that need to be put in place to ensure that once you establish a minimum wage, that there is the appropriate enforcement. And so we have enforcement legislation which sets out penalties for employers who choose not to obligate their responsibility to provide employees with a minimum wage rate. And so it's three steps. The first step is establishing a commission that looks into the matter and provides key recommendations to the minister. The minister then We'll take those recommendations, discuss it with cabinet and the wider caucus as to the implications of those recommendations and what the government feels it wants to move forward with. And then the next step is ensuring that you have the appropriate legislation in place to ensure that the minimum wage is something that is in law, that every employer must pay an employee um, above. And secondly, ensuring that you have enforcement provisions in place so that employers don't turn a blind eye to the order which is set.
Okay. So how how did your committee, for lack of a better term, how did you arrive at the figure that you arrived at?
And so the Wage Commission made a recommendation that a minimum wage between $15 and $18 in Bermuda would be economically palatable. And they provided a number of options between $15 and $18. The government at the time determined to go with one of the lower options because we determined that we can always adjust the minimum wage upwards. But if we put a minimum set a minimum wage that is ultimately too high at the beginning, and it does have a negative economic impact, it is very difficult to revise the minimum wage downwards. And so we took a more conservative and cautious approach in terms of moving forward with the minimum wage. We looked at the recommendation they provided, and then we done inflation adjustment because there was a lag between the recommendation and the time of implementation, and we progressed the minimum wage rate up into $16.40. So $16.40 is the minimum wage rate that is set in Bermuda. For employees that work in hospitality who receive commission and gratuitous, or gratuitous and service charges, we allowed a hybrid structure where they receive a base wage and then the gratuitous can make up the remainder of a minimum wage rate. If the base wage plus the gratuitous in any given hour are less than the prescribed minimum wage rate, it is the employer's responsibility to ensure that the $16.40 is paid on an hourly rate. For workers that receive commission, it's the same thing. If their commission doesn't add up to the average of $16.40 an hour, it is the employer's responsibility to ensure that the employee receives at least $16.40.
Okay. Shaina, I'll
So
turn it over.
sure. I actually had a conversation today about this because, as Chris alluded, that we are the conversation has started again about revising our current minimum wage, which is $6. So I'm blown away by the figures in terms of double digits that you're calling here. And I think for us, one of the questions or concerns, how it came about was because currently we were reviewing our social assistance program. So what UNESCO outlined in their report is that because the minimum wage is so low, or basically the baseline in terms of people's salary is so low in the country, there are more people in need of social assistance. And of course, that's never a sustainable situation. So we need to look more, in terms of from an economic standpoint, what needs to happen there. What triggered the conversation in terms of looking at the minimum wage in Bermuda?
We certainly had notable exploitation of workers. Bermuda has one of the highest cost of living in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we find it egregious that we had workers that were subject to such low wage rates. And so it prompts us to say, from a social justice standpoint, what needs to be done. And we determined that we had to set a minimum wage rate to ensure that that exploitation doesn't continue to take place, so that we can improve the purchasing power of employees within the country so that they can provide for their basic needs. So we're driven by the social justice ethos ensuring that persons receive dignified wages for 30 days worth.
Yeah. And that was part of the conversation I was having today. So full disclosure, guys, I'm also the chairman of the board at the Chamber of Commerce here in the Virgin Islands. So, this is obviously going to be something that the business community is going to be watching keenly. And what I said to the interviewer today was, this is something that, it can't be, it is a change that's made overnight. More study has to be done because, again, the conversation was triggered from other conversation where the focus was about social assistance. And, I said to them, if we might investigate how much it actually costs to live in the BVI and find out that our living wage is way more than we think. Because as a tourism destination, we find everything is going to be more expensive, and I'm sure it's the same across all of the OTs. And, as you said, exploitation is something that we have to guard against, because that is something that we do see here, even though it's not a large conversation, but it is about I think it's the income inequality that persons are basically experiencing, especially since the hurricanes in 2017 and then the pandemic recession that came after 2020, where, tourism as one of our main economic pillars was shut down. So persons were basically unemployed for months, if not over a year. So those are definitely things. So in terms of the response from the business community, are you seeing resistance? Is it something that they're welcoming?
Before we implement it, we did do significant rounds of consultation with the business community, especially the hospitality and hotels and restaurants, to ensure that they were clear on the framework that we were using, and to have an understanding of what was some of the negative impacts of the implementation of the minimum wage rate. So there's that dialogue been doing, and I think that was important for us to have a seamless transition into establishing a minimum wage by ensuring that we had meaningful consultation with employer groups. So you didn't hear the uproar from employer groups when the minimum wage was implemented, because we had set out our policy position early, we had done consultation on our policy position, and so then we moved forward with implementation. There was some employers who were hesitant to provide employees with a minimum wage when we first introduced it. However, because we have the strong enforcement provisions within our legislation, it would be extremely costly for those employers, if they did not implement that minimum wage rate.
Okay, so you incentivized it. Okay, so is it already in effect, or is it going to be a transition period?
So the minimum wage rate came into effect on June 1st, 2023.
Okay, so it did go into effect this year. And in terms of the entire process of consultation, how long was that? Or in terms of when it was started, or the conversations were started up until June 1st, was that over the past year or shorter?
It was a lag between receiving the initial report from the Wage Commission, which set out the recommendations. Then what the government would have done is, prior to the implementation of any form of legislation, would have put out a policy paper as to what was the government's position pertaining to implementation of a minimum wage rate, which was partly based off the Wage Commission's report. And then we used that position paper that the government set to engage in consultation. And you will see that the minimum wage rate and what we implemented was revised from the position paper that was in the position that was in the policy paper, based off of the consultation that we were able to have with industry.
Okay. And that's good to know, because again, I'm always encouraging persons here that we have to move from just having ideas where we do the proper study and evaluation and the analysis of, the different options in order to be able to actually select the best option. Is there part of the policy now going forward a set time for review? So I know one of the things I would like to see happen here is that, whether it's every 5-7 years, we have a review. And if it's okay, it's still on par in terms of living standards, that, you don't have to change anything, but it's important for us not to let it go more than 10 years. I think the last time we reviewed it, it was over 10 years since the review before that. And, this was 2016, and the minimum wage at that point was $4.25. And, even in the new at that time, we knew that, the income inequality that was there was very apparent based on, people's request or need for social assistance. And that was a very, very partial situation. So is there a trigger in terms of when the review if there will have to be an ongoing review?
So my office has written to the chairman of the Wage Commission, and that is the next steps in terms of we want the Wage Commission to provide us with recommendations as to how we advance the current minimum wage rate. In their initial report, they had suggested that it would be practical to move it along with the rate of inflation, but understanding that we are in high inflationary times in Bermuda, whether or not that recommendation is still practical for the time that we're in. And so I've asked the Wage Commission to provide me with further clarity on how they recommend we should proceed with advancing the minimum wage rate. But any changes that we make to the minimum wage, we will ask for the Wage Commission to opine on it before we implement any changes to it.
Any changes, okay.
And that ensures that the technical work is done, but also you have private sector representatives on the Wage Commission who can speak on behalf of industry, and we have labor representatives on the Wage Commission as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's very key. So I'm definitely going to be doing some more research to understand how you guys went about your process, because it's going to be something we have to start to work on now, and to kind of, figure out what our approach is going to be, because it's needed. And I said to them, businesses know that whether it's the employees are also their customers. So them having more disposable income, it continues to feed the economic engine. But things have to be done in such a way, as you're saying, there's so much economic disruption that has been happening, and no one can predict what is next. So we always have to strike a balance with social development as well as economic development at the same time.
We have a question that's coming in from Miss Caroline King. What is Bermuda's present GDP per capita?
I think at last record it was $114,000.
In what currency?
US.
And also she asks, was the public involved in the consultation process?
Oh, most definitely. And so the position paper that went out was a public document, and we asked the public to submit any feedback to that particular document. I also ensured that I done my runs as it pertains to the media, being on radio programs, and articulated the government's position so that we can understand the concerns of the population. In the consultation, I determined that some people feel that the minimum wage is set too low, and then some feel it's too high. And I take the position that the minimum wage is the appropriate first step to ensure that persons are remunerated fairly for a fair day's work.
Honorable Robinson, you had something you want to add to this discourse?
Oh, just the fact that we also in the Turks and Caicos would have increased our minimum wage April of this year, April 1st of 2023, and we would have gone through the process of public consultation, etc. So that's something that we could also share. And we probably might be close in line to where you might want to go with your minimum wage increase compared to Bermuda, who is over 100K per capita.
Yes, we're not there yet.
No, we're not quite there. And
we're not there yet.
At 625 previously, and we moved it up to $8 for the basic minimum, and for industries like the security industry and construction, we have it at $9 an hour. So it was kind of a
And
tiered system,
and what currency is that?
US dollars as well.
You have Turks
And
and Caicos dollars, or you use
Turks, well, the Turks and Caicos crown dollars that we do have, which is more like a collector's item, is 1-to-1 to the US as well, but we use US currency. So we were considering the tiered system with the service workers being slightly lower, but what we found that it was easier just to make it the minimum wage at
Mhm.
$8 an hour, and then have a higher tier for those skilled areas that we thought about. So in that instance, that's how we ended up doing it after our significant public
Only that.
consultation as well.
Okay.
So
So why was that done? Because this is the first I'm hearing. Usually we hear about the service industry versus a baseline. So why did they choose construction or the trades? I'm guessing in terms of at a higher rate.
well, because we figured it was a higher skill set, and again, it was three tiers initially, where you had a lower tier,
Mhm.
which would have been, I think we were considering 725 for the service industry workers, because we anticipated them being able to get their gratuities to kind of bump them up to $8 or more, right?
Mhm.
But we said that to make it less complicated, because if you are saying that you have the service industry at 725, and then the other industry, the quote unquote other industries at $8, and then the security workers and the construction industry and a couple of other key persons at 9, then effectively your minimum wage would have been 725,
Mhm.
because we didn't have the calculus the way Bermuda would have done it, where you have it that the employer has to
To
fill
make
in
up
that
the difference. Yeah.
no matter what to get to the 1640, which
Mhm.
is the effective minimum wage. So we said, well, if the minimum wage is going to be $8, then we have to make it $8, as opposed to trying to explain why, well, it's $8 for the regular workers, but really it's 725 for the other workers. So from a
Yeah.
community standpoint, so all right, well, let's just give everybody the extra 75 cents, and that be the minimum, and then just
Yeah.
have one tier higher. So that's how we
Okay.
more or less decided. But it was several tiers as well.
Okay. Yeah, that we don't have here, and again, it's something for us to do the study and do the public consultation, based on the information that we find out, and figure out where the balance has to be struck. So I will definitely be following up with, to see. We don't like to reinvent the wheel. At least that's my
Mhm.
philosophy. So you guys have already gone through the gauntlet. So we're gonna learn from what's been done, and hopefully again, we want to be fair to people, because someone called in on the radio show and she was literally hurt. She's like, $40 a day, Shayna. It was not 40, it was 32. Because it's $6 times 8. And she was like, what can that do for us when the price of eggs is $8-9 here right now? So it
per
is.
egg,
Pardon me.
$8 per egg.
$8, no, $8 for a dozen eggs.
Gotta contextualize.
All right.
We have some folks tuning in from Turks and Caicos. We have, I hope I pronounce it correctly. You want to pronounce that for me, Honorable Robinson?
Deonta, is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Deonta Baisden from Turks and Caicos.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have the Honorable Sean Malcolm, who is the Minister of Health in Turks and Caicos. Thank you, Honorable, for tuning in. He's also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's also the chairman of your party, or one of the chairman of your party, Honorable Robinson.
He was the former deputy chairman, because we just had Congress on Saturday. And your guest, the last Turks and Caicos guest, Honorable Kyle Knowles, he is now our chairman for our political party. So
The chairman, chairman.
yeah, he's the chairman of the whole party. So it bodes well coming on your show, Honorable Famous and Honorable Smith Archer. So I don't know what's next for me.
So just from a political standpoint,
right?
As we're wrapping up, tell us what I forgot to tell us what's the name of your party in Turks and Caicos.
The Progressive National Party.
Progressive National Party. Okay, and what are the founding principles of your party?
The founding principles of our party is essentially people focused, economically progressive, and basically moving the country. And I stepping out a little bit here, but basically moving us closer to self-determination. That's what it's all about.
And Honorable Hayward, what's the name of your party?
And so I represent the Progressive Labor Party, and we operate on the ethos of social and economic justice for all. And we have enshrined in our Constitution self-determination and moving to a sovereign nation as part of our mission statement for our organization. And so we continue to develop the country and strive to that particular objective.
Mhm.
And we also have the Honorable Dr. Carl Dawson from, I think, somewhere you might know, Shaina.
This is actually my district representative.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You pulled him out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Good evening, Honorable Carl Dawson. And we have
How can you join us tonight?
Abigail Dows. I can't pronounce
Delancey. I think it's Delancey.
Okay.
I think there's a little typo with the S. It should be A.
How you know? And how you know her name so good, Honorable?
I did tell you at the beginning I'm an all island member. I have to know all people from all islands. And she is a friend and former classmate, though.
That's a good recovery. Yeah. So I mean, the thing is, and I as you said earlier, I already knew the answers, but I wanted people to understand Progressive National Party, Progressive Labor Party. The only difference is the L or the M, right? It's the same philosophy. And we're going to do a show one day based off of what we have in the Caribbean is what you call sister parties that will form basically not necessarily the exact same time, but around the same time with the same philosophies. And Bermuda, the PLP, which is our party, and the PNP in both Jamaica and the PNP in Turks and Caicos are philosophically aligned as sister parties. So we have an episode on that in itself. But I
think that would be very important, Chris, because that is one of the things I know for us here in the Virgin Islands, where persons often say there's no difference between the parties, or you don't see a difference in the philosophy. So why should you support one over the other? So that is definitely a much needed conversation that we need to put on the roster to kind of start to break those things down and help persons understand it's a name is just not just a name. It should be that.
I could tell you without categorically, in Bermuda there is a vast philosophical difference between the PLP and there's other folks. But we'll get into that another time.
Yeah, so we definitely have that conversation.
So this is what Honorable Dawson puts up. Good evening, Cousin Thomas. Okay. Well, guess I just got myself a new cousin. So in closing, any final words to the people of of Turks and Caicos and the whole island and the region, Turks and Caicos and the region, Honorable Robinson?
That's Turks and Caicos, all island. That's Turks and Caicos. Final words for the people in Turks and Caicos. Your government continues to work hard for you, and we are.
Say that again. I couldn't hear you. It's a technical difficulty.
I said your government continues to work hard for you. And we are a listening government. So while it might seem that we don't communicate enough with you, We will make our improvements there, but we are hard at work trying to deliver on our manifesto, which is the citizens contract. And we want to make sure we can get a contract renewal in another 18 months or so. So we intend to deliver on all of our promises, big and small, and we intend to be more engaged. Definitely going forward. So not hearing from us doesn't mean we're not working for you. So over the next 6 months, going forward, you'll see a lot more of our efforts over the time. And to the region, of course, we have similarities from historic connections to basically philosophies as a people. And I think we are one people, and where we can learn from each other and not reinvent the wheel. Perfect example, the conversation between basically Honorable Jason, myself, and Honorable Smith Archer. They're going to be doing what we've already done in our countries very, very recently. So they can utilize that type of insight to be able to come up with a good solution for their minimum wage in the Virgin Islands. I almost catch myself to
Mm.
what you call yourself, right? So I think we're integrated, and we have to be big enough to allow the smallest among us sometimes to help lead us in the right direction, regardless.
All right. Any closing remarks, Honorable Hayward?
Certainly, I echo the sentiments of the Honorable Member Robinson, and governments must have a human-centered approach to policy development, and I think that has been demonstrated by the Progressive Labour Party in Bermuda, as it pertains to having the interests of the people of Bermuda in the forefront of all of our decision making, and ensure that the outcomes of our policy work actually benefit the people who we actually serve through the same social contract that has been discussed by the Honorable Member Robinson. The challenges that we have um, most times are not unique to any particular territory, and there is huge opportunity for us to leverage our collective resources and knowledge to ensure that we have the effective solutions to the problems that we actually face. Um, MP Famous, you would know in particular that this government has worked hard to extend social protections, make our tax system more progressive, expand labor protections. We want to reform our education system. We want to reform our healthcare system. We are focused on ensuring that we have the infrastructure in place that allows our businesses to succeed and thrive in Bermuda. And so we will continue on the trajectory that we're currently on. And I encourage any of my regional colleagues to reach out so that we can assist and we can leverage resources so that we can grow capacity throughout the entire region.
Yeah, that's important. We have a question from Miss Caroline King that we're going to pull up in a minute. I think Honorable Robinson was answered, but I think what's most important is that we, as people in the small islands, we know more about our islands than somebody in England and somebody in America. And too often we find our governments hiring consultants to come down to give us some their opinion on something, and it doesn't work out. Whereas we know what happens in small islands, right? And so we have to lean on each other more and get away from the, if that white ice is better than black ice, right? So that's what I would say. That's one of the ethos of this show is for us to lean on each other, right? So we have a question that Honorable Robinson should like to answer.
All right, thank you. I think the question that Caroline gave earlier was, what is your leadership philosophy? I guess she might have been asking it to the panel, but for me particularly, and hopefully this does answer her question, because I think she was feeling like we were kind of skipping over her question, so that's why I kind of flagged it. My leadership philosophy is basically servant leadership. If you say, he that is greatest among you should serve. So if you're focused on giving service to the people of your community, of your country, of your district, of your region, I think you'll be in a good place, because all of your decisions will align for their betterment, which in turn will make you better and better position to be able to deliver on their behalf. And I don't know how much persons listen to the late Jim Room, but he says the best way for you to get people to do what you want is to first do what they want for themselves at first. So if you want to be in politics for a long time, which I'm sure all of us got into give service to our communities and our people, we must first serve those who would have stood in line for hours in some instances, depending on how quickly your balloting process takes place, and actually produce for them. And then they will in turn put you back. You always know when a government is actually doing good by the results that comes the very next election, because you literally have a quantitative measure of how good you've done a job as an MP. You don't get that in all jobs to say whether or not you've done well or not, but you have a literal quantitative measure on how well you're doing as a member of parliament. So I think servant leadership would be my leadership philosophy. And hello to June Samuel from the Virgin Islands. I see her popping somewhere there.
Yeah. We don't use the B word no more.
Right.
Any closing remarks, the lady from the place without the B word?
So I educated some persons today that we have always been the Virgin Islands. That is our official name. And that, it's important, again, when it comes to identity, that we know who we are and whose we are in terms of that drives, again, the philosophy of our community. Because I think, what the Honorable just shared in terms of servant leadership is so key, where we're putting the people before our own interests, our own wants and needs. Because I might have ideas in the Chamber of Commerce that, I think are good for businesses, but at the end of the day, we're here to serve and support our business sector. And it's for us to first put them first, essentially. And if there's something, we're trying to get them to understand, we have to sit with them and have those humble conversations and say, this would be for the greater good and what that looks like. So I definitely support what he's saying, and, happy to have been here tonight. And look forward to future shows in terms of even exploring some more of the things that we spoke about tonight.
All right. So we have to, because of our media partners, we have a 1 hour window. I want to thank both honorable ministers for taking time to come on the show, because we know that politics takes a lot of time away from families, and we want to thank both of you. And again, thank our media partners, Cayman, Marl, CBN, ZJB in Montserrat, Radio Saba, PJFE, Barbados, Korean Broadcasting Channel, and Radio Turks and Caicos. So until next time, which is in 2 weeks' time, we will be updating you with what's coming up next. So thank you once again, and we will continue this caucus offline.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.